Hello and welcome back to Artsy-Island-Girl. In the last few years, we have been gifted with what I think is one of the most amazing things, and they are 3D embossing folders. This particular one by Tim Holtz. I love all the detail that you get within the embossing, and the beautiful thing about it is there's so much detail that once you've embossed and say inked the image, you really don't need to do much for a card. So it makes super simple cards, but there is a little bit of a technique to it. So this here is the 3D embossing folder, and it is quite a bit thicker than a regular embossing folder. So very first thing, we don't need this bottom plate. Move it right out of the way. And then I'm going to also open up my top tab on my multi-purpose platform for my big shot. So I'm also using some Distress Heavystock because it can handle the water that I need to mist on it, and it's also thick enough that when I do emboss all that texture, it's not going to start to rip. If you use paper that's too thin, it does start to rip. Sometimes you can hide it, but sometimes you just can't. So very first step, opening our folder, you need to get a misting bottle, and you're going to mist your paper just a couple times. And for something like this, I will do it on both sides. I'm going to center it in the plate. Now this particular plate is a little bit bigger than a standard size card. I'm just making a standard size card, so I am going to adjust my piece of paper on there, and I am going to run it through the machine a couple times. I really want to press that paper into place. Press all of those nooks and crannies and those grooves in there. So I do run it through a couple times, but look at all of that texture. And by using the Heavystock, there's one tiny little tear in there that is going to be easily to hide, but I don't need to worry about any other, or having to hide any other tears. So let's get the machine out of the way here. This piece, because I've just misted it with water, I am going to set it aside to dry, and I'm going to work on a different piece of paper that I've already cut. I'm creating a standard size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so I do need to cut this down so that it is 4 inches by 5 1/4. So I'm cutting off about 1/8 of an inch from each side, or 1/4 of an inch from one side. So there we go. Now you may ask, why didn't I just cut the paper to that size before embossing? And I find with these 3D folders, because of all the pressure and stuff like that, sometimes you get a wonky shape if you, I lost my train of thought. Sometimes you get a wonky shape if you cut it ahead of time, and then it just looks weird on your card base. So I wanted to make sure that it was nice and square once I was done. So the first thing I'm going to do, a new ink color just came out, Saltwater Taffy, and I'm going to use it on this because I think it would be really pretty for the flowers. I'm using a very, very light hand with my blending brush because I'm really just trying to get the color on this surface. If some of it happens to get on the background, I'm not going to worry about it, but I'm trying to avoid that background as much as possible. Here, I'll show you on the one that's torn. Oh, not that one. The one that's torn. If I'm heavy-handed, I'm going to get something like this. And that may be the look that you're wanting, but less is more, and you can never take ink away. You can only add it. So if you decide at some point that you want something to be a little bit darker, you can add more ink to it. But if you find that you've done it too dark, you can't take it away. So you definitely want to be a little bit careful to begin with. So I do want a little bit of darker, so I'm going to use some abandoned coral on some of the raised edges, and I'm using an even lighter hand than I did for the first color. And then I am going to use some bundled sage because I think it would be really pretty with the coral color here. And I picked out a card base that was green based on the colors that I used in my first sample, not on the colors that I actually picked to do this in. So I'm definitely not going to be using this card base because it's too yellow. So I'm going to pause this video a second, find an appropriate card base. All right, there we go. This is a much better color. It's just going to bring out all those lovely colors. I'm just going to use some Tombo Multi for this. The thing I like about Tombo Multi is it's got, you have about 5 seconds to shimmy things in place and then it is stuck. And the only way to get things apart after that is ripping things apart. So you know that when you send someone a card, it's not going to fall apart in the mail. So I'm going to hold this down because of all that texture there. Sometimes the paper does like to warp a little bit. So I will hold it down while I am gluing it in place. And then it is stuck for good. For something with this much texture, if I were to put a sentiment on the front of it, I would probably pop it up a little bit just to add, just so that it stuck out a little bit. But there you go. Exactly the same card, 2 different color schemes, but absolutely beautiful and really such a simple card to make and not a whole lot of extra things that need to be done with it once you've got your paper embossed. If this is the type of content you love to see, please don't forget to hit subscribe and I will see you in the next video.